Nnamdi, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Now, what do you make of this latest development from the CBN? Just all of it geared to get banks, deposit money banks, to loan to the real economy.
I think it's twofold. I think one is to get them to support lend to the real economy, and the second one would also be to reduce their own cost of liquidity management. So if you think about it, market is about what, somewhere about 500 billion, liquidity about 500 billion naira. So if you have how many banks, 20, 21, 22 banks, at 2 billion per bank, that means what? The most you see is in the region of about 40-something billion that they can place versus 500 billion. So that really saves the central bank with regards to having to, its cost on liquidity management. And then once again, like you said, trying to get them to lend.
So how do you think how do you see the banks receiving this, and how will this change the playing space for them?
Well, the first thing that will happen, we expected and which we've seen, has been a scramble for short-dated government securities, which is always the first step. Then from there, we expect them to go to longer-dated T-bills and go into longer-dated bonds.
But the CBN before now had also talked about, that the banks are not going to have unlimited, access to, government securities, as aware. That was another strategy also to sort of, keep all the corners tight, because obviously the CBN knows where the banks are going to run to avoid that. So.
Yeah, so they had set the LDR, loan deposit ratio, at 60%. From the figures that we've seen, most of the banks were already at 60% as at 31st of May.
Oh, okay.
So for now, the difference might not be as much as people expect it to be. But with time, it's a number that central bank might be able to tweak, right?
Lower?
Yeah, no, tweak higher. So they might decide, what, let's move it to 70 and get everybody to ensure that people, now end up having to lend out to the various sectors that they want. And that's why they also give a weighting of 150% to certain sectors. But most of the banks are already at 60, so I think the first reaction really still would be for them to move to the lower dated, shorter dated government securities. And then let's also forget that the money goes round. I mean, even if the banks were to create debts, new loans to their customers, it only goes from one bank to the other bank to the other. That money still more or less stays in circulation, unless they're buying FX, which mops up the liquidity. If not, you're still going to have the same cycle. If Bank A gives a loan to Mr. Y, who ends up paying a vendor who uses Bank B, the money goes from Bank A to Bank B. Liquidity is in the system. So somebody would still end up having to buy government securities.
Well, that is interesting. But let's quickly, while all of this is happening outside our shores, we're also keeping our eyes on the U.S. Fed, and Power has signaled that there could be a rate cut. We're expecting that could happen as early as July 31st this month. But what are your thoughts on how that is unfolding?
Well, at the last FOMC meeting, I know the Fed chairman had voted for a cut. I think most of the other members dissented. We've heard him talk during the Senate committee and mentioned more or less emphasizing the needs or the reasons why they need to cut. Economy is struggling. Inflation isn't going as high as expected it to. Basically, they need to give a bit of a boost. We know that, he's one person out of the panel, and so you have the other members who still have to agree with him for that cut to actually happen. But we also know that the chairman typically has a strong voice and helps lead the direction of the committee as a whole. But if that happens, we'll most likely see Eurobond yields come down, then maybe start to see a bit of interest in our short-dated instruments, because the carry trade gets more attractive for them.
Okay, Nnamdi, we'll keep our fingers crossed and see how that pans out. Thank you for talking to us today.